Texas governor follows his buses to NYC. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has bused 15,300 migrants from the U.S. Mexico border to New York City, by his count. Now, he's coming to New York, too. The Republican is scheduled to speak this morning at a breakfast in Midtown hosted by the Manhattan Institute, the conservative think tank. He'll outline a vision for resolving the border crisis and hold a wide-ranging discussion with Manhattan Institute President Reihan Salam. His vision so far includes putting floating walls on the border without federal permission and a massive program providing migrants free bus rides from Texas to states with Democratic leadership. Abbott's been the bane of New York City Mayor Eric Adams' existence. The Democratic mayor has called him a madman, threatened to campaign against him, and accused him of using this crisis to hurt cities with black mayors. Tough guy Abbott teased Adams earlier this month, saying he couldn't last a week in Texas, since they have so few migrants in New York compared to what we deal with every single day. The governor has seemed to delight in Adams' struggles, saying self-proclaimed sanctuary cities like New York love to promote these liberal ideologies until they actually have to live up and apply them. Adams isn't planning to meet with Abbott, and his office declined to comment ahead of the governor's visit. Governor Kathy Hochul isn't planning to meet with him either, and isn't welcoming her fellow Gov. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than. Greg Abbott's record on immigration is using vulnerable families and children as political props, Hochul spokesperson Anthony Hogrebe told Playbook. If he wants to be part of the solution to this humanitarian crisis, he should press his conservative colleagues in Congress to work with President Biden on common-sense immigration reform. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than. It isn't clear what else Abbott's planning to do in the city. A fundraiser or two would be expected, but a spokesperson for the NYGOP wasn't aware of anything, and Abbott's campaign didn't respond to a request for comment. Maybe one event is enough. The breakfast is at a private club next to the hotel that's become the city's main intake center for migrants. It will play well in Austin when his picture is taken entering into the building next door to the Roosevelt Hotel, Republican City Council member Joe Borelli said. Curtis Sliva, who's been leading protests against migrant shelters, thought Adams and Abbott should try to reconcile and jointly pressure the federal government for a new border policy. But can Eric Adams put his humongous ego aside? Sliva, the former mayoral candidate, asked. He has said this will destroy us. So why won't you sit down with the man who could turn off this spigot? Time equals 400 Ms. greater than. It's Wednesday. Got news? Send it our way. Jeff Colton, Emily Go and Nick Reisman. Where's Kathy? Making a housing announcement in Yonkers and signing public safety legislation in Queens. Where's Eric? Delivering remarks at a meeting of the Mayor's Fund Board of Advisors and later making remarks at the grand opening of a teen center at Mott Haven Library. Quote of the day. Even in the world of high finance, this court cannot endorse a proposition that finds a misstatement of at least $812 million to be immaterial, Judge Arthur Engoron in a ruling Tuesday on former President Donald Trump fraudulently inflating his net worth. That's a big no. Dozens of Democratic state lawmakers are pushing back against Adams' suggestion that migrant families could be moved into congregate homeless shelters as the mayor seeks an all-of-the-above solution to the city's housing needs. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than. Any move to do so would require the state to act, and the legislators would want Governor Kathy Hochul to block it. In a letter signed by more than 30 members of the state Senate and Assembly, lawmakers urged Hochul to oppose any plan to change shelter regulations. History has shown that placing children in congregate settings puts them at elevated risk for sexual abuse and emotional, academic, and developmental setbacks, the lawmakers wrote in the letter obtained by Playbook. In New York, advocates and officials have fought over the years to prohibit this practice and to set humane and safe standards for our shelters. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than. City Hall does not have a formal proposal in place to make the change that would put migrant families into the congregate settings. But Adams has also indicated every potential solution is on the table in order to reduce strain on the city's resources and services. Still, the letter is another indication of the delicate politics surrounding the migrant crisis and how to respond with housing support and other forms of aid. State officials, meanwhile, have moved to open sites for migrant housing, including the federally owned Floyd Bennett Field in Brooklyn as well as a former correctional facility in Harlem. More than 116,100 migrants have come through New York City's intake system since 2022, and the city currently is caring for more than 61,000 people. Nick Reisman Housing Group decries budget cuts. A prominent trade group that represents affordable housing developers says Adams' ambitious plan to boost housing across the city would be rendered toothless by his recent directive that agency heads slash their budgets by 15% by next spring. The New York State Association for Affordable Housing wrote a letter to the mayor and budget director on Monday urging them to immediately exempt all housing-related agencies from the cuts, which Adams has said are necessary to compensate for increasing migrant-related costs. The new crisis proves that our housing agencies need more investment, not less, the organization wrote in the letter, shared exclusively with Politico. Understaffing and insufficient resources have long plagued housing agencies. Further cuts will extend project timelines and approvals for desperately needed affordable and supportive housing properties in New York City. Adams unveiled a wide-ranging plan last week to spur housing growth by revamping outdated zoning rules, saying the move would usher in a new golden age of housing. Time equals 400 ms, greater than the mayor's savings plan, which he said could be avoided with more assistance from Albany and Washington, also includes a hiring freeze. Janaki Chadha Hive curriculum sees upgrade. The nation's largest school system is revamping the way it teaches students about HIV for the first time in more than a decade. Schools Chancellor David Banks announced a newly streamlined syllabus Tuesday that reflects advances in HIV prevention and treatment guidelines, the first major update since 2012. New York City is the largest public school system in the nation and a pioneer in best practices in student education, Banks said in a statement. That is why it is so critical that we ensure our young people are receiving the most updated information to keep them safe and healthy. Both state and city public schools require students in kindergarten through 12th grade to receive annual lessons on HIV and AIDS. Time equals 400 ms, greater than as part of the curriculum, including 71 new lessons. Pupils will get HIV education that is age-appropriate and representative of students' diverse backgrounds. The Department of Education's Office of School Wellness Programs developed training materials, including lesson overviews for parents and caregivers and a 30-minute self-guided course for teachers. Roughly 37% of individuals recently diagnosed with HIV in 2021 were 13 to 29 years old. Medina Torrimore from the city. The city will pay to house low-income residents outside the 5 boroughs, drawing the ire of county leaders. Politico Pro. The Adams administration will appeal an order blocking the city from sheltering migrants at a former Staten Island school. Daily News. City Hall didn't renew a towing company's permit after the owner of a rival company, now indicted for bribery, allegedly asked the Adams administration to do just that. The city. Bill de Blasio was seen smooching a mystery woman Friday. New York Post. Migrant aid baseline. When Hochul unveils her budget proposal early next year, she expects it to include a substantial amount of funding to respond to the migrant crisis. Hochul told reporters on Tuesday the $1.7 billion the state has already committed for migrant support is a potential yardstick for next year. How much money do I need in next year's budget? She said in the Red Room at the Capitol. We know that we have to hit at least a baseline of what we've done before we're making decisions that go into the future. This comes as Hochul and her top budget advisor have urged state agencies to hold the line on spending proposals for the coming budget season in Albany. Revenue from taxes is slowing, while COVID-19 pandemic aid from the federal government has evaporated. Hochul pointed to the spending increases of recent budgets, which she called necessary investments. Spending for healthcare and education have seen record increases. But many state lawmakers and advocates in Albany are bracing for a tougher budget negotiation than in years past when the legislative session resumes in January. We are still investing more than any administration in history, she said. But we have to be smart about our investments and not the assumption being that we can always continue with that pace. Nick Reisman. Time equals 400 Ms. Greater than Priley update. Political operative Jacob Priley was still in critical condition in a medically induced coma as of Tuesday evening after he was hit by a car riding a bike last week in Park Slope. But friends were able to visit the Berlin Rosen PR Maven's hospital room where they read passages of the power broker to him while unconscious. If that's not classic Politico, I don't know what is, said State Senator Brad Hoylman Seigel, who Priley used to serve as chief of staff. Jacob's a fighter. And he's got a long road ahead of him to recovery, but if anyone can pull through, it's Jacob. Especially with all the love and support that I see here in his hospital waiting room, he told Playbook. Attorney General Tish James's office is among those suing Amazon with the federal government accusing it of monopolistic control. The Associated Press. The U.S. Supreme Court could hear a case challenging New York's ammunition background check requirement. Spectrum News. New York State is planning more funding for offshore wind development. Crane's New York business. Anti-sanctuary. 9 Republican members of Congress, none of whom represent New York City, are the original co-sponsors of legislation introduced Tuesday to keep federal funds from being used for migrants in sanctuary cities. Rep. Nick LaLota of Long Island, who unveiled the No Bailout for Sanctuary Cities Act, said New York Democrats are free to keep their sanctuary status, but these officials, who can repeal those costly policies any day, cannot expect other states' taxpayers to fund their indiscretion while their policies remain in place. Among the other sponsors are Representative Mike Lawler of the Hudson Valley and Reps. Andrew Garbarino and Anthony Desposito, also of Long Island. Adams has defended the city's sanctuary policy even as he challenges its right to shelter provisions. Emily Go. 1,500 more licenses coming to NY. New York cannabis regulators plan to issue nearly 1,500 more cannabis business licenses when it opens up a general license application period October 4, Office of Cannabis Management Executive Director Chris Alexander said at a Cannabis Advisory Board meeting Tuesday. Businesses from every part of the supply chain will be included in this licensing round, including micro-business licenses that are allowed to both grow and sell cannabis. Otherwise, companies are not allowed to produce and sell the product with the goal of preventing monopolization of the market. A potential hiccup. Some cannabis attorneys have been questioning a provision of the adult use rules that require regulators to tell the public at least 30 days before an application period opens up. While the rules have been approved by the board, they have yet to be published in the state register and officially go into effect. There would not be 30 days between when the rules go into effect and the October 4 application period, leading some attorneys to believe that the application period would be vulnerable to a legal challenge. There's always the chance that someone's going to sue, said Jason Klimick, co-leader of Barclay Damon's cannabis team. It could be someone who couldn't get their ducks in a row quick enough. For example, an aspiring cannabis business owner who needed an extra week to sign a lease might sue to delay the application period opening up. But a spokesperson for the agency said in a statement that the agency is confident that opening the application period on October 4 is fully compliant with the letter and spirit of New York's landmark cannabis law, with ample public notice given in multiple public settings dating at least as far back as the July 19 Cannabis Control Board meeting. Mona Zhang, a third suspect, was arrested for his involvement in the death of a 1-year-old in a Bronx daycare. The New York Times. A new Dunkin' Donuts in Rockland County will be giving away free coffee for a year to its first customers. LOHUD. 7 are still hospitalized following the fatal crash of a charter bus carrying Farmingdale High School's band members and teachers. Newsday. A mafia-linked Schenectady man and his wife face new charges of insurance fraud and exploiting pandemic aid programs. Times Union. Even Knicks fans can appreciate former NBA star Magic Johnson was at the Northeast Bronx YMCA Tuesday to encourage seniors to get the RSV vaccine. Assembly Speaker Carl Heasta, State Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins, State Senator Jamal Bailey, Bronx BP Vanessa Gibson and City Council member Kevin Riley joined. X-Pix. Making moves. The environmental group Align has named Theodore Moore executive director. He was vice president of policy and programs for the New York Immigration Coalition. City and State. Engaged. Ben Weisler, an associate at Davis Polk and Wardwell, recently proposed to Emma Thames, senior manager of consumer insights at Fetch Pet Insurance and an NYT alum. The couple met on Tinder 6.5 years ago at a bar on the Upper West Side, near where they live together now. Ben proposed at the top of a hike in Banff National Park in Canada. Pick weekend wedding. Maya Sirkin, senior manager of client success at Indigo, married Michael Jones, execution services trader at Jump Trading on September 16. The couple met in NYC and got married at the Sculpture Garden at Bridgeport Art Center. Pick. Another pick. New York universities like Columbia and NYU reap hundreds of millions of dollars in property tax breaks. The New York Times.